Okay, well, welcome, coaches. I was hoping we'd get a few more people, but the thought for today are from Mark Twain. Don't let your schooling interfere with your education, number one. And number two are those, he had another one that I thought was pretty profound. Those that don't read the newspaper are uninformed. Those that do are misinformed. And I think with the situation that we have now with the internet and all that going on, it's even more imperative that 50% of what you read is probably not true. It was really funny because I've actually found the only news station I've ever found that gives you both sides when I'm here. It's called Al Jazeera. It gives you both perspectives. And I think that's the only fair way to do it. But if you want to stay positive in this environment, don't listen to the news. Don't read the message boards, because polls, rankings, and message boards are just like toilet paper. They're all full of crap. Just putting it in perspective for you. The other thing that you can do to stay positive is smile and make that a imperative for your kids as well. So are there any questions over what we've covered thus far? No? Okay. So for those of you, I had a couple of questions. When I started going through the one that I'd pulled off the internet, I realized when we were going through the high school cross-country workouts that I pulled from the internet real quick and had somebody print off for me and then started putting them up there. I was going, oh, great. This isn't the right one. And John asked me about that today, about something that was in there. So all the stuff has been revised, and the way you get it is not through Coaching Education. I can give it to you, but easy way to do it is to go to, let's see, share screen. Let's see, Windows. Nope, that's not it. Oh, no, screen is stop share. Okay. Sorry, I'm learning how to do this all over again. Okay. Here we go. Okay. This is actually what it should have looked like. The first page was right, but everything after that was, well, started to be needing to be corrected. But I fixed all that. So you'll be able to pull that. Somebody asked me, you don't think people should start until August 1st? And I said, no, my suggestion would be to target August 1st for everyone. I would target July 1st for those that are serious about getting better. So if you look through here, one of the other things that I had adjusted but I hadn't done was 40 minutes the first 3 days, then 45 the second 3 days, take a rest day, and then easy runs of 50 minutes the next 6 days, then take your rest day, then stay at 55 or 50 depending on if they're freshmen or if they're sophomores. If they're sophomores, they need to go to 55, as well as juniors and seniors. And then they've got to have that 10 to 15% reduction in miles or minutes. And so you go to 45 to 50 for those that were at 55. Those that stayed at 50, you'd go down to 42, 43 for the next week, for the regeneration week, and then you'd hop back up. So I think the really big thing here is that every fourth week needs to be a regeneration week. As I go through this, one of the things that John saw was the fact that I didn't have any absolute speed workouts there. I do now, John. Those are the flying workouts that we do. And I think the only, Sue and Chris, you might be the only two on here that aren't familiar with those workouts. And those are based on going into 7th, 8th grade. You can do some of those, but we stay completely away from them simply because with as many kids as we have to organize them and everybody want to do them. So I just don't do them with our 13, 14-year-olds. They could do them, but I just don't do it. It just takes a lot of organization to get those things done. And with as many kids as we have, we just don't do it. But if you ask me what the two most important workouts are for any distance runners, by far and away, it's the easy runs done right. And by done right, I mean staying below AT for the entire workout. And then the second one is at the opposite end of the spectrum, teaching your body how to run fast. And the only way you can do that is through speed, absolute speed. And that's the flying 30s, the 50s, 60s, or the 150s. And in my book, I've had, when I started doing this, it just was mind-boggling to me. And the reason that this kind of all came together was I kept reflecting on the fact that when I was in high school and when I was in college, I couldn't run any faster than when I was an 8th grader in the 400. And that's because when I was an 8th grader, I trained for the 400. And then when I was in high school, I was always running either the mile, 2 mile, or the 800 or something like that. And then same was true in college. I was running the longer distance races, but I would run a 400 and I wouldn't run any faster than I did in high school, which didn't make any sense to me. And then I started playing with some of this stuff years and years and years ago. This was around 93, 92, 93 that I started playing with this and started figuring out what was going on and why. And that's why I think speed is one of the most essential things you can teach, because if you can teach them to run faster, then faster races don't feel that much faster and they can use their aerobic base to get through it. But we literally off of eight weeks of training would take kids, our high school kids, to an indoor track, flat indoor 200-meter track, and almost to the kid, every single one of them set a lifetime PR in whatever race they ran that day. And it was their first race of the year. It was an indoor meet, and it was on a flat track. So they had everything going against them, but they all ran unbelievably well. And with that, I knew we were really, really on to something. So I started doing that 10, 15 years ago now or more with the flying stuff. Because if you do the flying stuff right with the 4 minutes of active recovery, you're just getting in an easy run at the same time. So you're killing two birds with one stone by doing the absolute speed, but you're not doing it for a long enough period of time that your heart rate gets so elevated that you have to bring it back down. It's almost at the end of it. Wouldn't you agree, Andy and Matt and Garrett, that as they get to the end of it, their heart rate is still in the zone? So when it's still in the zone, you just go into your easy run and then come back at 4 minutes and do the next one. And kids love those workouts because they get speed. What did everybody do when they were in school? They wanted to go out for recess and see who was the fastest. That takes them back to that. So you can do those types of workouts anywhere that's flat and smooth. Just set up some cones out there. You've got to have an acceleration phase and a deceleration phase. And then, so you basically need 4 cones anywhere that you do this. The only one that I would insist doing on the track all the time is the 150s. And the 150s are your best indicator of what they're doing for speed and how that translates over. Dr. Owen Anderson can predict within a 95% certainty by taking the starting line of a race, let's say a cross-country race, going out 30 meters and have everybody run as fast as they can using a Finish Links camera. He can predict to a 95% certainty of what order the kids are going to finish a 5K race in based on their speed. So wouldn't it make sense that we should be training speed? So that's what we do. So if I was going to put all the things out there, those are the only two things that I would worry about. I would even go into the first meet without having done anything else. And then the only other thing that you really need to worry about is a VO2 max work, unless you're getting ready to be able to if your training bank, as we call it, or your running bank is being done correctly, then you're able to make more training deposits there, and you're not racing that much. And by racing that much, I wouldn't race more than 2 times in 3 weeks so that you can get that positive training in. I think those are the big things. And then there's one other thing I want to tell, and then we'll answer some questions. In 1993, I was telling my dad that I thought what was happening was that people were doing their easy runs too fast, and that when people when people were starting their track and cross country season, they'd do 30-minute runs or whatever, and then in a couple of days they'd be incredibly sore. And you guys can kind of remember that. And I was convinced, after doing some stuff myself, that you could take a heart rate monitor and not let them go over AT. Now, we didn't know what their AT was because some of them were just starting or whatever. So I told them all to stay below 165. That was the thing. I knew they'd be below AT if they did that. So we told them to stay below 165. And if they got above 165, they had to walk until they got back down under. They did that for 60 minutes. They did it for 60 minutes, and not a single one of them got sore. I want you to think about that. Their first day of practice without training for a bunch of them was a 60-minute run, and they didn't get sore. That's all because lactic acid couldn't accumulate because they weren't going above AT. So you can get away with a lot of things by doing it correctly. But anyway, enough of that. Any questions about anything that I've said here?
I got one, Coach.
Okay, I'm listening.
How early should you start to incorporate the flying workouts if you've got kids that have been training over the summer?
Well, I think it's starting on the 7th week. I do it on the 7th and 8th week, and the 8th week is the regeneration week, and then we start the next 2 weeks. We do the same thing again, and then we start adding in the VO2 max work. So that's the order that I would do it, and we've had some incredible success by doing it that way. People think they can get in shape by doing hard workouts and stuff like that. That's not how you get in shape. Doing hard workouts gets your fitness level up, but it's not how you get in shape. You got to do the base work, the easy runs below AT, add the speed to it, and then start doing the VO2 max work. And then if you have enough training time, then you can add in the anaerobic conditioning stuff, the cruise intervals, those types of things. Because in my mind, that's the least important one to add in. Does that answer your question, Andy?
Yes. And as far as repetitions, how many would you recommend just starting off with at the beginning until you move up to the 12 repetitions of the 30s and the 60s?
Well, here's the thing. You do it with your junior high kids too, don't you? Okay. Um, I think it's different with junior high kids. You can't do near as many. And the primary factor behind that is you have to remember there's 4 minutes of active recovery between each one. So with that in mind, you've got to do 4 times the volume that you're doing. So if you're doing 10 of them, there just went 40 minutes. There's only 36 minutes of active recovery between, but you've got to give yourself the time that you were actually doing the flying part of it. So as you're doing about 100 meters of it for 9, let's say 10 of them. And if you're doing 10 of them, that's going to be 40. So you're at 40 minutes right there. So with that in mind, you got 40 minutes plus your training. So you're already at 60 minutes if you just did 10 minutes of warm up and 10 minutes of cool down. I'd probably do more of the warm up, 15-minute warm up, and even less of the cool down because the warm up is the most important part of it. And one of the other things that I would throw out there is to make sure that the very first flying part that you do, whether it's the flying 30s, the flying 50s or 60s, or it's the 150s that you start from. If you do those, the thing that you have to remember is that the first one shouldn't be quite all out. You got to give your body a chance to get into it. And I think that's really important. So as far as a sheer number, for high school kids that are doing it for the first time, if they're freshmen or so, I would say 8 on the first ones for the flying 30s and flying 50s or 60s, and maybe 4 of the 150s, and then work up to 10. And then I would do 5 on the 150s for them probably. You could do 6, depending. And then by the time they're sophomores, you should be at 11. By the time they're juniors, you should be at 12. That's just a good rule of thumb. Because if you think back through this, 12 minutes is 48. Okay? 48 plus your 15-minute. Let's just do it, rounding it off. If you're just doing 12-minute warm-up, 12 plus 48, 60, and you still got your cool down to do. So anybody that thinks you can't get a long run in by doing this is sadly mistaken. And the nice thing is it's a long run training your aerobic development system or aerobic conditioning system correctly. So you're 70 to 75 minutes of easy running, even though you've done flat out speed or absolute speed. So I would never do this with my 14 and down just because of the numbers that we have. But as far as high school kids, I would do it every single time. If you've got a junior high program that's incorporated with the whole thing, Andy, Garrett, Matt, John, you guys, Kathy, you guys could tell me this. Don't the kids or your athletes enjoy doing this workout?
Yes, ours do.
Is this, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was gonna say ours did, and I mean, just looking back on my son 3 years ago and 4 years ago when he was a senior, those were his long runs, those flyings. He'd get in anywhere from 8 to 10 miles on some of those
Oh yeah, yeah.
total. So yeah, you're definitely true. It's a long run. And the kids, even the junior high kids love it. So
Yeah, and that's because you're going back to the basic principle. Think about it. When you were a kid, everybody wanted to see how fast they were. All we're doing is promoting that. Everybody wanted to see who was the fastest. So we're just taking advantage of what they're already wanting to do anyway. You're taking them back to being a kid and having fun.
Yeah, I was gonna piggyback off kind of what John just said there. With Ethan, like I trusted that he knew what he was doing, and he would remember the time. So he would I would say you can go on your runs, and he'd probably get 8, 9. I think one time he said he even got to closer to 10 miles on his run just because he was just going and when that 4 minutes hit, he was hitting his acceleration phase and going. But I would say kind of even with the younger kids, like the 3 freshmen I had this past year on that 4x8, I think it all came back to the fact that flying workouts were consistently in our program. You know, like in junior high, our schedule is just so, we have a Tuesday meet this week and Thursday meet and next week. And so it's kind of all over the place. So it's hard to get a consistent training regimen in, and
Right.
but the flying was consistent. So
It's one of the most important key components. The other thing that I would say with all of this, and I'm going to throw this out there, is the most important day for recovery is 2 days before. So I would insist on an easy day then, unless there's underlying circumstances or whatever. That's the easy day. You could even look at it as a recovery day and run in the recovery zone. I called that on that new sheet of paper that I gave you with the heart rate zones. I called it the warm-up zone. I called it the recovery zone. And what else did I put in there as, aerobic maintenance, because you're not losing any aerobic fitness. You're just not gaining as long as you're in the recovery zone. So that's where a lot of the athletes that are getting down to 5 minutes or so a mile, when they're so fit, they just stay in that zone so that they don't have to run so fast. I mean, it sounds crazy, but it's true. So I think that's one of the things to take into consideration, is you're going to get a lot of running that way. There is absolutely no need, I mean, no need whatsoever for a long run, because you're already getting it. You're killing three birds with one stone. You're getting your long run in, you're getting your aerobic conditioning run, aerobic conditioning, and you're getting your absolute speed. You can't ask for anything better than that. Kathy, you were going to say something?
Where do you guys like to do your flyings? Do you like to do them on the grass? Do you like to do them on the roads? I know that 150s, we talked about the track, but where does your team, those of you whose teams really like it, where do you like to do it?
Well, and I want to throw something in here, and then I'll let them reply to that. I think it's really important, and I put that in the paper as well, that when you're out on the road, you have to do it for a time, because you don't have cones set up there generally or whatever. And when you're doing it that way, they have to do the acceleration phase and the deceleration phase right. But it's important that for the 30s that they don't go over about 4 seconds of all out speed. They got to get the feel of doing it correctly on the track or something, so that they know where it's at, and it takes about 4 seconds, so they can go 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004 and slow down. For the 50s, they don't want to get outside of about 7 seconds. So those are things you've got to keep in mind when they're doing these. That's acceleration and deceleration with them. The 150 is completely different. It's on the track. It's measured. I would measure it at both ends of the track. And then that way, wherever the wind's blowing from, you got it. You're doing it with the wind all the time. And I can tell you how fast somebody is based off of their 150s. It's such an easy task to do. It's not even funny. Okay, Kathy asked a question. Garrett, you were going to chime in?
yeah, we usually, at least in cross country season, we always will either go to our park or kind of, I mean, our golf course is where we run our meet, and it's a mile away or so. So we will do them there sometimes. But yeah, we try to, especially in cross country season, hit the grass as much as possible, because that's what they race on 95% of the time, for us at least. And so, and then we usually will throw spikes on the last couple, just at least early in the season, to kind of get a feel for them in the grass and get them back used to those spikes. Because I mean, that first meet, their calves are burning if they haven't worn their spikes before that. So
yeah, and that's a great point, Garrett. If you're not, you should always do the workout toward the end of it. If it's flying, it gives them great, because then they feel fast. When they lace those spikes on, it's different. should be getting in about a mile worth of stuff to get their calves used to it, or you're going to go the first meet and their calves are going to be fried because the spikes or the heels are less than what they are and everything else. So that's an easy way to avoid problems later. Anybody else?
We do ours on the track, the 150s. And we do some of our 30s and 50s on the track, but we also do them on our football field too, because the grass is mowed down low and it's easy to put some cones out on the football field and do them there. Plus I can keep them somewhat close by. We have some nice 500-600 meter loops on their 4-minute run. They can go and circle back and come back.
And the key is to be back right at 4 minutes. You don't want to go longer than that. Anybody else? Okay. Any other questions? Okay. John, you threw me somebody had something? Tracy, you had something? Okay. John, you asked me a question. Like I said, I'm more than happy to put this all together to help whoever wants the help. You had sent me a preliminary. How close is that to what we did with Wyatt when he was a senior?
I looked at that and from that original handout that just had the A and B workouts, it pretty much followed that. Except for we had a really good, the speed work. We had 5 days, almost every 5 days, we were doing some type of speed work. And in between we had A days with a couple easies as well. So it was pretty close, but it was almost where instead of having a B workout, or no, excuse me. Yeah. Instead of having a B workout, it was almost always a D. So we were almost always doing a flying.
Yeah, that's much better. The other thing that I would add in there is those of you that have been around and I've helped, you've noticed that I'm not afraid, and I would encourage you to, the day before the meet, to do a flying workout. If it falls right, you do it then, because some kids will run so much better off of that workout going into the meet. How many times I've had kids do set PRs doing their 10 or 12 flying 30s the day before the meet, because you got to remember, it's a totally different energy system. It's an easy run, and it's the day before. It's not 2 days before. So when you get to the regeneration week, you can also look at that as not only a reduction, but maybe take one of those days as a recovery run day in there. That'll help with the regeneration for that week. Okay. Anybody else?
I'll piggyback kind of off what you just said there, Ramsey. And one of what I found the past couple of years is we do 150s the day before meet. Like our kids are like spot on. And part of it is I think the reps are a little bit less as well. So it's, we have a recovery, especially before, our regionals or state. Usually we don't do it before state. It's usually falling before regionals, but it's also kind of a shorter run in there too. We don't have to, say, okay, we're going to do a super long warm up and cool down if we're kind of tapering down anyways.
Right.
So, but it also kind of gets them in that feel of this is what it should feel like at the end of a race. And, for an extended period of time. And that when it comes to that 150 point in the end of a cross country race or a track race, I say, think back to yesterday. And it's quick to recall for those kids. And that's kind of one of the things I think is the biggest help.
Yep.
Garrett,
Yeah,
how many
I got a quick
repetitions did you
question.
do?
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, I was just going to ask Garrett how many repetitions they would do on the day before a race.
Same as usual. I mean, 5, with my junior seniors, they'll hit 6. But if we're on a regeneration week, it's 4 if it's kind of my lower group and 5 with my upper group, but usually it's 5 or 6.
Okay, thanks.
Somebody else had something?
Yeah, I had a question. So we have all of our meets aren't on Thursdays. We run Wamego on that Saturday for the invitational. So that makes our next 2 meets kind of awkward because Wellsville's we race and it's like what 6 days later, or 5 days later, and then we go back to 7 days. But
It's
I know
easy.
I've done it before where we don't put emphasis on Wellsville for necessarily time, but we do. I've done a tempo there during the race.
Yep.
And then Prairie View, which is the week after, again, we're racing pretty regular. We've actually gone to about 1.5 miles. Well, anywhere about 1.5 miles. I want them to do 40/20s for 3 minutes. And again, we kind of make the race more of a workout than we do necessarily a race.
Right.
And that gets us ready for kind of the tail end of the season. But I'm just saying it kind of puts a couple of A-type workouts in the middle of a race for those kids. And we've had success with it. I know why it did. So it was kind of interesting to see that.
Yeah, it breaks it up as well. And it doesn't, and here's the thing I'm going to throw at you. If you're using a meet as a tempo run, don't put them in spikes. Only let them wear training shoes, because the minute a kid puts on spikes, it means race. And they're going to race, and you can't blame them. So if you're doing a meet as a workout and you're serious, don't let them wear spikes. Because I'm telling you, the mentality is totally different when you lace those spikes up. And I think Wellsville's a great meet to do that in, to do a tempo run. I've had a lot of kids do tempo runs at that meet instead. And that's basically an off day because you're not expecting anything. And I always get irritated if they're over their heart rate of what they're supposed to be on their tempo run. So I don't know, can they wear heart rate monitors?
I think the Acacia handbook says no. But I know, like with Ethan, when we would do it at league, I would say it's making you run slower. So how's it benefiting you? I mean, like he would freak out about it, but nobody's over there, like plucking at their jersey or anything. I said, just turn the beeper off. And I mean, if you're in your zone, then you're good at that point. But I'm pretty sure it says like no GPS watches and stuff like that because it's an aid. But that's, I guess, where we go.
I've actually had kids do the 10-10-20-20 workout in the middle of during the race. They'd start out as 10-10-20-20, and they'd do that throughout the race. They'd run through the finish chute at the end and keep going. And people were flipping out because they'd do that the whole meet, win the meet, and go through the finish chute and just keep running. People get such a kick out of that. And the kids love doing it too because it's so different. Here they go out hard and people are behind them, and then they slow down and then people get in front of them. So it's really like a fartlek to them. So it's been interesting that way. Tracy, Sue, you guys haven't been through a bunch of this stuff before. So if there's anything that I can answer for you specifically, don't hesitate to let me know. That's not a problem whatsoever. I have gotten to the point where it's a lot easier for me to do workouts and answer questions. So that's what I'm going to do now. What kind of questions do you guys have about specific? You got a question?
Hey, Coach, so I just sent you a long email because I didn't want to bother everybody with it. So I don't know if you'll have a chance to look at it. But I coach both at high school and middle school. So I just had, questions in the email relating to both levels of kids. So feel free, don't look at it now. It's really long.
Okay. I can't, it didn't come up yet. Oh, but you sent it to the other one. Hold on just a second. Sorry. Yep, I got it here.
I just said, I like everything you're saying and I'm gonna work on applying it. And some of the stuff we do already, some of the stuff we don't, but my biggest things on the AT, and we're in Chicago, and I don't think I've touched base with a lot of people here who are big in the running community. And unless you can recommend anyone who does the Omega Wave testing, nobody seems to know what I'm really talking about.
They don't have a clue. They absolutely
No.
don't have a clue.
They don't. So I did my own AT testing, but like I said, I think there's some room for error there. But with your generalization numbers with the boys and the girls with the 160 to 175, is it safe to say that if that's what we use, most kids should be safe using that range?
Well, yes, the problem is if a kid, let's say you were using that range and they were in 173 and their AT was 172 or 171, then you're actually getting out of the zone. So it's almost imperative that you know what it is. And then the reason you gotta really have it is not only for all the aerobic or anaerobic conditioning workouts, the tempo runs, the cruise intervals, because there's no way you're gonna do those right.
Okay.
Because that's all based off a heart monitor. Many people say it's about effort. No, you're not getting it exactly right if you do it that way. So there's some Omega Waves out there, but teams that have them. Some college teams have them, but not. What's amazing to me is I have some insight into the Omega Wave group, and it's been really funny. It's like basketball teams will have them. A lot of college basketball teams have them, but not the track teams. I mean, the track teams really need this stuff. So it's just one of those things that you have to be aware of. I don't know of anybody in that area that might have them. The guy that would actually know is actually going to be on tomorrow. He's the coach at University of St. Mary there in Chicago. And he might actually know if somebody has an Omega Wave up there.
Okay.
No, in that area it would be him.
Okay.
Because he's not helped with camp and those kinds of things before. I mean, if you got a whole bunch of kids together, we're interested in doing this, we can fly our guy up there and have him do it. It'd have to be, you have to have his stuff paid for. So other than that, I don't care.
Coach
Yeah,
Ramsey,
well, let's
wanna-
chat about that.
Oh, sorry. I'm just going to say, I talked to Coach Ramsey earlier this week, and we've actually have a guy coming down to our high school on Friday this week, and is going to test every one of our kids. I'm going to pay for it out of our budget, but it's going to give me great data to be able to use the rest of the summer, all season. And like he said, put those numbers into those tempo runs and all those workouts. It's just going to make it so much more easier. We're really excited to get it done.
Well, yeah, that's a great idea. Cause like I said, I've got a high school and a middle school, so I can reach out to our head high school guy tomorrow and then piggyback our middle schoolers off of that.
Well, and here's the other thing that I would tell you, Sue, is you don't have to just limit it to your high school and high programs. Trust me, when you tell people what this machine can do, there will be others that are interested in the running community. They want to know. So we can talk about that. We can talk about that later.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Yep, no worries. Okay. Anything else?
I got a question.
Yes, Tracy.
Are you there?
Yes.
Okay, so We talked about warm-ups, and you said to be consistent with warm-ups in practice as you do with meets. What is kind of a time frame prior to a start of a meet you would start warming up? And is there any dead time between the end of warm-ups and starting a race?
Yeah, there's going to be a little bit because the kids have to get changed for spikes to do the 150s. They don't need to be doing everything up to the minute. I would say the dead time is somewhere around 2 minutes. Now it could go longer than that. They've got to keep warmed up, but I would say we do it based on a time, which is kind of unique, and this might be something for Sue to piggyback off of what we do for our little kids. We actually walk to get them going and get them circulated. We actually, at our big meets, we actually walk for at least 5 minutes before we start running. So they walk for 5 minutes, then our young kids, I only allow to do 5 minutes. Our next group does 7.5, and then we up to 10, and then up to 15 for the high school kids. And then we do our strides and go into it. So you can pretty much predict, Tracy, just how long you're going to need. I would say 25 minutes. If you do the 15 minutes of warming up where you do 7 minutes or so of below in the recovery zone, the warm-up zone, and then 7-8 minutes where you're doing aerobic conditioning in that zone below AT. And then do your strides, you're ready to go. You don't have to do a lot. You absolutely have to do a lot.
All right. Thank you, Coach.
Yep. Okay. Anything else?
Just kind of looking back, I guess for me being a first timer, for the first timers is the big thing I struggled with was just remembering what each workout's paces should be similar to. Like, you know, okay, we're doing 300s or 400s or thousands or not 3-minute runs or what that, like, I guess for their sake, you want to like reemphasize what those paces should be. Like that was probably one of the biggest things I found trying to recall, and just having a paper, you know, there with me to kind of just remember, okay, we're doing this workout. This is what our paces should be like. And then it makes it easy for me to figure out what their ranges should be.
Well, the only one that you're really concerned about that point is anything that's 2 to 5 minutes in duration, which is the VO2 max stuff with 1-to-1 recovery. In those particular ones, you're doing it at 2-mile race pace or 3,000, 3,200 meter race pace. So you've got to look at it that way. But on top of that, we're also throwing in a fartlek. So you're doing 40-20 or you're doing 60-60. So it's not straight up, because we're trying to replicate what's going to happen so that you can do those things. So it's big from my perspective to do stuff like that. As far as the 400s, again, if I had one kid, I would do 400, but I don't have one kid. I would do 80-second runs or 85-second runs, depending on where you're at, so that, especially if you've got girls and guys, that they're all doing basically the same thing. It's okay if they go a little long on those for some of them, but you want to do a minimum of, I would say at the high school level, if you got gals out there running, I would be doing 80 seconds. If it was just guys, I would be doing about 75 to 80 seconds, or you could do 80 to 90. Our kids, Sue, do 90s. We do sets of 4. At the beginning of the year, we do depending on the age group, we'll do for the 7 and 8s, we'll do 2 sets of 3. Sometimes I'll allow some of them to do a set of 4 and a set of 3. And then for the 9, 10s, we do 2 sets of 4 with 3 minutes between. each of the sets. For the 11 and 12s, we do 2.5 sets. For the 13, 14-year-old, we do 3 total sets. We start out with 90 seconds rest between each one, with 3 minutes between the sets. They run out, they mark where they're at, and then they come back. So they're always chasing. And it's quite the spectacle, isn't it, Chris? To watch the kids chasing.
Yes.
And coaches, Chris is one of the coaches that comes with us. And by the end of the season, they know they've got their hands full with some of the kids that they could keep up with early in the year, really rolling. And it's great to see because we do the workout at the same point, so they see how much further they're getting each. So it makes quite a difference to do it that way. And we always let them turn around and come back and chase. We do 60-second runs as well, which replicates basically 300s on the track. But again, we do it in the structure where we have everybody ending at the same time. We have everybody starting at the same time. We control all that so that we don't have to get all this confusion going on with all the kids. And it works so much better doing it that way. Does anybody have a comment about doing that? And again, what I was saying with what I would do is if I was doing half miles, I'd do it based off of what my fastest kid was doing. And let's say they were averaging 220 for a half. If that was the case and you wanted to do halves, then he does a half and everybody else does 220. And then he turns around and starts chasing them all the way back, wherever you did this at. So that gives you perspective. With one-to-one recovery, it'd be 220 as well. And then I would do for high school, I'd be doing at least 7 of those. So, but anyway, that's where we're at on those types of things. Sue, do you have a question? You got to turn your mute off.
I got you. Yep. So I think I have this, but when they're doing it and then they stop, so the 220 is over, 2 minutes and 20 seconds is over, they have the recovery. Are they just staying in place at the recovery so then they can chase? They're
Yeah.
staying in their same area where they ended?
Yeah, they're staying in the same area, but they know our kids because it's somewhat of a chat, they just and mark with their foot where they finished. And then they're in that area. And then when because I always give them a little bit of warning, and then they know they got to be back to there. And then I just blow the whistle and they take off again.
Okay,
They do everything on the whistle.
that makes sense. Got it.
Everything's done on the whistle.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Again, I think the key component here, especially for the next 6 weeks, is to get the kids going. You need to have at least 4 weeks of just straight, flat running, easy, below AT to accomplish what you need to start a base. I'd like to see 6 weeks of base, but with some of the kids, you're not going to have that. And then the next 2 weeks to be completely devoted to doing the flying workouts, and then start adding the other stuff. Start it before then if they've been training since July. So in the middle of August, you're ready to start adding that stuff in. And I always do, you can use the first run, the first race as a test to see where you're at without having done a single workout, or you can do the first workout